Hi, and welcome to Color Your Home Happy. I'm Justine, founder and creative mind behind Rainbow Shaker, a colorful interior design studio in London. My goal is to spread joy and happiness through the design of cheerful interiors. If, like me, you think that we need a colorful bubble to escape the daily gloom, then this podcast is definitely for you. Each episode, I will be welcoming well-known guests from various colorful backgrounds. You won't find us speaking about the right way to use colors. In this podcast, I want to help you trust your intuition and give you all the confidence you need when designing interiors full of dopamine. Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Color Your Home Happy. I'm Justine, your host and colorful interior designer at Rainbow Shaker. Today, we're gonna travel back in time to the 80s, and my travel companion in this journey is gonna be none other than Jakob Mizrahi, a colorful furniture designer from Denmark who's building 80s inspired furniture with lots of color. Hey Jakob, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Your beautiful surrounding. Are you at
Yeah,
home? Wow.
that's my kitchen. It's probably a bit.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I live. It's pretty colorful, I must admit.
Looks like a photo shoot location. It's just perfect.
Yeah, that's what people say a lot of the times. But of course, it didn't happen overnight. Just been built up slowly, everything. So, but yeah, there's a lot of colors. There's a lot of patterns everywhere. And yeah, I like it.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your journey?
Yeah, well, I have a weird background because I'm a trained musician. I trained as a classical pianist and I had composition too. So I made this weird change or journey. Again, it's something that, I've come over time. It didn't happen from one day to another, but I guess it happened maybe over 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. Because I didn't want to be a musician anymore. I mean, as a classical musician, you teach. That's what, gives you butter on your bread. So, and I've always been someone who designed things. And the trouble was with teaching music, it was fun and nice, but I just missed that creativity. And I'm someone who always been creative, always been designing stuff. It doesn't matter if it was music or if it was things. So I just always have had that need to design, to create something. I literally get depressed if I don't do that. If I can't use my intuition when I'm working, of course you can't when you're a teacher. Then you have to be structured and you have to, you have a schedule and all that. I can't work like that. It feels like that. Of course, you need to have structure in your life. It's not that. But when I'm working, I need to have some kind of, I don't know, wiggle room for being creative to change stuff. So that's why I prefer to make one of a kind things. It's not that I don't make more than the same table twice or 5 times, but if it's more than that, it gets really boring for me. The more you make it, the less creativity there is into it and the less you can change. So if I could just make bespoke stuff all the time, that would be perfect for me.
Do you get still inspired by your musical influence?
Yeah, I think I still think as a composer. To me, I have just, changed the tools basically. I have a miter saw, I have a table saw now, and all that and measuring tools instead of music sheet and a computer to. But the process to me is the same. Or the piano, because I mean, when you play classical piano, you're so into the piece, you have to dig really deep into the piece. And it's the same process I do when I do something. I'm totally consumed in that very piece I'm doing. So to me, it's very much the same. And to me, it's very important that everything I do has its own little DNA, like a piece of music. If it sounds exactly like the other piece of music or whatever someone else do, it would be a bit boring to me, at least. So it's very important to me that each piece has its own DNA. That's good design to me.
How did you think about going into furniture design? Was it something that was, for example, from your parents?
Yes. When I was a kid, I always looked at my mom's interior magazines. There was a Danish one, still exists, and I loved it. So what happened was, I think it was in 2014, I went up into a secondhand shop, and boom, suddenly I just looked at the same magazines my mom had back in the late 80s. And I could recognize some of the articles. There was one with house with a pink piano. And I was, whoa. I thought that was really cool when I was 14 or 15. And I was totally blown away with everything. And we're talking in 2014 where everything was, everything had to be no colors, beige, at least even Denmark. So yeah, I was blown away by it and it was fun. And I was suddenly 14 or 15 again. So, and then I started just, sprucing things up because I didn't have any skills at all. I was out in my shed working. Of course, it didn't turn out very good always. But I got better at it because I couldn't. And now I'm running out of space. So, so I can't mix that much. I always keep, the prototype because otherwise I can't remember. I don't write down all the, how wide is this table, or so I have to have like a reference. Otherwise, I need a bigger house.
That's it. You have to change house to have more stuff.
Yeah, then I will just fill it up with more stuff.
That's a curse.
Yeah.
And do you have quirky or funny anecdotes from your early days as a furniture designer?
Yeah, I do. There was a lot of people that was asking, are you on drugs or what? Because that's weird. That's really weird. Maybe back in 2018, I can't remember exactly when it was. And my dad called it, you have a circus home. It's a circus now. It's not a house anymore. You ruined your house. It's a circus. All these weird comments. And it just tells how much, mass media can brainwash people that suddenly colors are okay. And suddenly this style is so uncool. And now we just want 80s stuff. Or like two people are into 80s stuff, one in Sweden, or maybe one in the US, one in Australia. That's how it was in 2016. And now it's just 80s, 80s, 80s everywhere. So yeah, it's weird to see how it's changed in fairly short time.
Yeah, trends are funny that way. I'm from the 90s and I see that some things that I used to wear as a teenager or that you stopped wearing them because it started to be awful are now coming back. So it's really weird. A lot of people, when talking about your style, are talking first about the interior design style that is called the Memphis design.
Yeah.
Memphis was a style that was in the 80s. It's lots of different shapes, all colors, but you're more than
Much
Memphis.
more.
You're getting inspired by the 80s in general.
Yeah, I think so. I guess when I started out, I was very inspired when I was, as I said, blown away by these magazines back from the early 80s, especially. I know that a lot of what I do is kind of Memphis, probably still, but it's not like I'm thinking much about it at all, that now I need to make something in a certain style because it comes all by itself. It just pops into my head. I mean, I think my biggest inspiration would probably be Philip Stark, to be honest. I mean, just the shapes and everything. For me, it's always the shape that is interesting. It's not so much the colors. I mean, the colors come secondary. Of course, they're important too, and they can visually make other colors pop out, and you can use that in your whole composition, but it's more the shape. And then you can say Memphis a little bit all over the place, and that's the style, as much asymmetry as possible. And that's cool, but it's not so, what can you say, clean as, for instance, Philip Stark or something like that. I'm probably more inspired by that when I'm designing the shape of things than Memphis that is all over the place. And then I have Cheerleader, which is probably pretty Memphis, to be honest, but that's probably one of the more Memphis-y things I've done. I always use, geometric shapes that when I'm thinking about something, making a composition out of, I don't know, a triangle, two triangles, a circle mixed together, and how do they get the balance, which is super important. Basically like an abstract painting, certain balance between colors and shapes. That's what interests me. And if that turns out super Memphis-y, well, Yeah, I guess maybe it does because you take geometry and mix it with screaming, flashy colors. Then
Yeah. Memphis is only one style that was in the 80s. And when people think about the 80s now, they think about this. But the 80s was, in general, very flashy, wacky as well. What I think about 80s for me, it's like the people that are exercising in the flashy outfit, crazy patterns as well. I see that we have kind of both the same pattern in your house and on my shirt. That was different as well from Memphis because I don't think that they're using kind of this
no,
pattern.
not in the same way. No, you're right. They had that bacteria stuff and all the patterns. Otherwise, no, there was a lot of, what can you say, graphical patterns in the 80s. I do remember that. Patterns can be a great effect, to just break up like a huge surface of just color and just mix it. But it depends on my mood sometimes. It really does. And what I figure out in the instant, because it's really not very planned when I do something. This was supposed to be, I could have made it like your shirt or something like that, but I don't know. Because of these legs here, I just thought, let's try to make it all just stripy. And then I have that lamp there, and then I have a bit what you have on your shirt. So it's very much just total intuition and not very thought out. So it is very much for me like composing a piece of music. You might have, an overall idea of what you're doing, and you have a structure and you have a few elements that you work with. But how it's totally turning out, I'm not always sure. Of course, then, if I have a customer that says I make them a drawing, of course, I can't deviate from that too much because then they'll get something completely different from what they ordered. So I can't do that.
In your furniture, there is kind of a common thread. We can see yourself in the shapes. And do you have like also a color palette that you use that we can find in all your furniture, or it depends as well?
I think I go through phases. I used a lot of pastels at some point, a lot of pink. I still do that. I love to have pink and blue together. Now I'm kind of into the yellow and pink. It changes all the time. And sometimes I just, let's do some primary colors.
So you have this color combination, black and white, yellow and the black, and it's always creating another emotion. And sometimes we can see as well the chair where you follow the shapes with the stripes. And then on your right, you have this pattern in yellow and black. It's following a bit the shape, but it's not stripes. It creates something different.
It creates tension, I guess, from the clean shape. Absolutely, yeah. The colors are really secondary to me. It's more if you want a shape to stand out, then you make it brighter so you can manipulate the shape or the visual expression a piece has with colors.
For me, what I do in a space is I like to create painted shapes to create this visual illusion in a space. And that's also true for me, like the color will appear afterwards. When you start to have the shape, I think you already know what the color is, like intuitively you kind of guess. So it's maybe even easier when you have this shape because you're already imagining how it will look like.
Yeah, you can close your eyes and see it with that. How would it look with that color? And it's much easier when you have the shape the way you want it.
Like Jacob, you love the wacky shapes and color of the 80s and want to recreate the look at home? Then I have the perfect thing for you with the Electric 80s wallpaper collection from Lush Home. Featuring bold geometric shapes and striking color contrasts, these wallpapers bring the spirit of 80s pop culture and retro futuristic vibes to life, electrifying any space in your home. Each bold design is a tribute to the decade where more was more, and every color was the right color. You can even try those amazing wallpapers beforehand by ordering 3 free samples with the code RAINBOW. Please note that this offer is limited, so head over to Lush Home's website right now. So you told me that you're using quite unique materials or techniques to create your furniture.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I always use MDF. I mean, when I started out, of course, when I wasn't self-employed, I just found scrap materials and made from that just to save money. I can still do that. Sometimes go to a junkyard and they just have nice pieces of MDF. I thought, why not? Just when you can take them, just use them. And then I use vinyl. I don't paint anything. I simply don't have the patience to paint. It doesn't work for me. Every time I paint something, I screw it up because I don't have the patience to wait till the next day or something like that. And I mean, vinyl is extremely tedious if you have to make patterns when I have to put 2,000 stripes on. But at least it's an ongoing process. I don't have to sit and wait. That's works so much better for me. And I always like to make my things super glossy. I use really glossy vinyl. Even if I was really good at painting, I wouldn't be able to have the same finish on my products. So I love to use my vinyl. I always had a thing for vinyl. You know, I never learned how to use it. So I guess it's just been learning by doing and basically just developing my own technique. To put vinyl on a surface is fairly easy. I mean, if it's just like a door or something like that, but stretch it and bending it and heating it up to just the right point, that can be tough. If you have more intricate shapes, that's not easy. So I think I just over the years and just being super persistent kind of developed my own technique, because I don't know anyone else who makes furniture with vinyl. No.
Yeah. When I was on the big interest battle, I upcycled mirrors with vinyl. It was just a round shape, but I so many bubbles. I don't think I had the right technique to do it.
It can be really tricky, and sometimes you just end up taking and throw it up. It can happen, especially if you have a big piece of vinyl, really big piece of vinyl. It can be really hard for one person to put it on and rub it on so there's no bubbles. Especially when you work in a workshop full of wood dust everywhere. Not to get dust under it. And for some reason, when it comes under the vinyl, because it's glossy, you can just see every little imperfection, and it's really annoying when you put a big piece on. So every time I have a bigger surface, I put it vertically and rub it on. Then I know it's going to be dust free. So yeah, but so that's a little tip. Put things up vertically.
When I did the mirror thing, I looked at the car technique when they're putting the sticker on the car at the end, but it's just so complicated.
Yes, I think I've seen a few videos too, how they work, and it's super impressive what they can do. It's a slightly different vinyl they use than I use. It's a bit thinner what they use. I don't use it for my furniture because it's too thin. And again, if it has to be glossy, I mean, there's very easily going to be a lot of imperfections in it because it's so super thin.
And sometimes do you print on vinyl, or are you cutting shapes on vinyl?
No, I'm cutting shapes, always cutting shapes. So it can be a bit of tedious work. At least that's just freehand. I cut the vinyl just so super fast. But if you have to cut them dead straight, there's like a lot. I wanted to make a pedestal for this, but I will do it one day.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. I enjoy much more to do the actual woodworking. It's much more fun than putting on the vinyl. Of course, it's super satisfying because you get close to the end result the more you do it. But to do the actual woodwork, it's much more fun. And you cut, and that's kind of a little bit more the creative process for me. I work very different from other woodworkers do. It's very technical, and everything is structured. Everything is written down. Then you have to cut this piece, you have to cut that piece, you have to cut. I'm not like that at all. Maybe I think 2 steps ahead, I have to do that because otherwise I can get into trouble. But I'm much more somebody who just start from A and end at B, and I don't even know exactly how I'm going to get to B. But at some point, the piece is finished.
And how do you know that a piece is finished? Because sometimes you finish something and then you're like, oh, I think it's missing something. So how do you know?
Good question. I think when I started out, because I didn't have much experience, my way from A to B, from start to finish, was like this. And it took ages. It took 3 weeks for me to make one piece. And when you get more experience, then you can almost feel what the order is to do things. And therefore, the result is much nicer. The finish will be much better, and you build up, say, a certain way of doing things, I guess, when you get more experience. So my way from A to B is only like that now. But there's still room for changing things. This vase, again, I made the stripes much wider, and I took it home, and I sat last week and stared at it, I don't know, a whole day, and went, this is not working. This is simply not working. Didn't get the effect I wanted it to give, so I had to take it back and go, okay, take it all the vinyl off and start all over again. And then, of course, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it turned out the right way because I was just closing my eyes and pretend thinking how it would look when it looks like this instead. So yeah, it can be a bit unpredictable to work that way when you're not planning too much, but I love that. As I said, if I had a day that was totally planned down to the smallest detail, I would just I would go beyond.
Yeah,
I
you
would
want
hate.
to surprise yourself. I always say that I'm myself kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because
Yeah.
I have a structure when I'm like working with clients, but when I'm creating, it's messy.
Yeah.
And it has to be because otherwise, if I feel there are some boundaries, I won't feel free to express. And then at the end, I always kind of surprise myself because I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't think it was going to go in that direction. And actually, I like it more.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It can go both ways, of course, when you use your intuition. Did with my vase and I just go, no, take it back. So you take it back and get it the way you want it. It's much more fun, isn't it? It's a little bit like kindergarten. I call my workshop my kindergarten. I mean, where I can play around because it kind of is. I normally have an idea. I have kind of visualized the end product. It doesn't have to end up like that, but I have a rough idea of what I'm going to do. But I've also just challenged myself many times, just going in. I want to make a table today. Let's make a table. Don't have a clue how it should end up. So, which was also that vase, by the way. I didn't have a clue. I just wanted to make a vase because I had a chicken powder can. I thought, okay, I can put flowers in that, and you certainly can't put it in MDF. So that's what inspired me. It's a stupid chicken powder can.
How do you make sure when you create a piece of furniture that it's going to be functional and aesthetically pleasing as well?
Well, I always want my things to be functional. I see a lot of chairs on Instagram. Oh my God. That chair is just a torture. I mean, I call my own chairs, even my Philip Stark ones, torture chairs because they're pretty awful to sit in. They might be beautiful and cool, but you wouldn't sit and just read the newspaper. So it's really important that things are functional. As a design is worth absolutely nothing if you can't use it. It's not a painting you put on your wall. You just, oh, it has to be pretty or speak to you. So it's a combination of it has to speak to you and it has to be functional too. Otherwise, it's a little bit like making a really, I don't know, design a really cool winter jacket, but because the design is so cool, there's no buttons, so you can't, there's no zipper in, so you're just gonna freeze to death. It's worth nothing. So it has to be a good combination.
So is it also by intuition or do you kind of experiment it before it's finished to see if it's functional?
Good question. I made so many different things. I can almost feel it. This lamp is just going to fall over unless I make this a little bit wider, or this chair is not going to work. Sometimes I know I like to challenge myself a little bit to just take it to the edge of what is possible. So sometimes I can have my doubt. Have I taken it too far? Or is it's gonna fall or something like that? But it haven't happened yet. It did at first when I started out. I was, oops, this lamp is gonna fall, but not anymore.
So you spent some years experimenting and seeing like, okay,
Yeah.
so this is not going to work. And then
Yeah.
after some mistakes, you learned and then it was just in you.
Yeah, it's basically been like that with everything. That's my whole journey. I did work with a carpenter at one time, and I learned a lot of just practical things and how to do this and that, more technical stuff. But the rest I had to just learn by myself.
Talk a bit about your beautiful home. How was it looking before when you arrived? Everything was white.
Yeah, everything was white. And I was very much into, 80s, 80s, 80s when I started out. When you look at 80s magazines, 90% of them had white walls. That was the coolest thing. You might have had crazy Memphis furniture, but the walls were always white. Then you would maybe mix, with bold color contrast somewhere. In general, everything was white. So I just kept that until 2 or 3 years ago. And then I went nuts. I didn't paint my ceiling though, because it's not very tall here. I think it's like 2 meters and 40 or something. So I didn't want, if I painted it some color, it would just basically feel like it was right over my head. So I kept it white. But everything else, except my piano room, that's the only one I haven't done anything to. I want to paint it, but I have a grant I can't move. One day I'm going to do it, but I haven't had the courage so far.
It's still an ongoing process. I have this kind of room at home as well. I closing the door and putting stuff in it. And then every time I'm in it, I'm like, okay, I should do something about it, but not today. When you design your home, do you put your furniture in the home and then that inspire you to paint the surrounding? Or do you already have an idea of the home and then placing the furniture items?
I had an idea and I changed it 8 times where I was going. But actually, I'll show you this lamp here, the line I made on the walls, I made to fit the lamp. And I guess I did the same with my bookcase there. So I think I did that, yeah. But the zebra stripes, that was just something I made up because at least somewhere I wanted to make just regular stripes. Again, intuition. It's not very planned. I have a rough idea of what I'm doing, but how it's going to turn out can change 5 times too.
And maybe sometimes you're also placing one item in the room and then saying, oh, maybe it will look better in the other room.
Exactly, yeah. Because it can get too much. Of course it can. So I do move them around, but I just changed them first for variety. And at some point I had made so many tables. Well, and then I thought, okay, well, they're the same height as my chairs here around my dining table. So why not just use them as like a stool?
Your home is like the reflection of your own self and of your own personality. How would you say that your home is aligned with yourself?
A lot of people say, how can you live like that? I would be so stressed out. And I always say, if it doesn't take more than that to stress me out, then it would be bad. So I'm totally happy living like this.
You can only be happy in this environment.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, definitely. And I guess, I don't know if it seems totally chaotic for people or it seems very structured. I have no idea, really.
I think there is kind of a structure in your madness. For example, with the ceiling, you have the clean lines, and then you have, as we said before, the stripes that are following the shapes, but also the patterns that are not following the shapes.
It's a bit like I compose like modern classical music. It sounds bing bong, bing ding dong. Yeah. And it sounds like a cat walking down the piano. Like we had a cat when I was a kid that always loved to walk on the piano when she was hungry. It sounds like that, but it's super structured. It's like incredibly structured. And that's how I'm thinking when I'm working too. There has to be like that little essence that goes through everything. If I didn't do furniture, I would probably be an abstract painter or something like that, because it's like maneuvering in total chaos. Everything is in reality possible. So you need to kind of find a structure in all the unstructured elements. For me, it works. I don't think it will work for most people, to be honest. I guess that's how I make my house too. There has to be a theme of the whole house, like the zebra, I guess I have in my kitchen. So that's a ongoing thing that kind of ties it all together. I have like a checkered theme in my bedroom. And so, yeah, there has to be structure. I mean, structure to be unstructured. I hope it's unique. And I always get baffled, because everybody wants the same. And I always been the opposite. There's no uniqueness. There's no room for creativity. Why not? I mean, you're a unique person. Why don't you make your home unique? You just want the same things that have been taught by media, that this is good design. And yes, it is, but a little bit more individuality would be nice.
I think interior design and furniture design is kind of a creative way of self-discovery journey. If you really listen to your guts and just go towards something that really sparks something in you, then you're discovering something about yourself that maybe you didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, do you have any tips or advice for listeners in maybe experimenting and creating furniture or with colors or anything that comes to mind?
Well, again, do it. Just go ahead and do it. You can get really far with a jigsaw, and look at some videos on YouTube, and you can just pick up so much and then go out and do it. I mean, practice like you're practicing the piano. You don't even have to create something. Just practice cutting a straight line with a jigsaw. putting, a piece of wood next to it so you can make a straight line, and buy some tools used. Because I don't know how it is the rest of the world, but here in Denmark, I mean, you can get them for a fraction of the price. And if you buy a decent brand, well, they're going to last. So I would do that. And vinyl, if people want to, I can always give tips of how to do this and that. So people can write me. Like if you cut a piece of vinyl, I always, cut it in oversized. You have to roll it on. You can't roll it on straight enough. I mean, if it's a longer piece, then it can be dead sure that you're missing out at the end. No matter how straight you roll it on, it's still not going to be straight enough. So you leave like bases, like 5 centimeters on each side, and then you just cut it with a utility knife afterwards, then it's perfect. So just dumb things like that makes it so much easier. Don't ask how I learned these things. It's just by doing it, like doing it over and over again. And one day you just wake up, what if I do it like that? So then you figure out how to do things in a smarter way. So you don't have to rip your hair out of your head. You know what? Something I always think about, I think I was 14 or something when I discovered Keith Jarrett. He is both a classical pianist, but he's mainly known as a jazz pianist. And he had his improvisations. He just went in on stage, didn't totally try to clear his mind, and just sat down and played something for 2 hours without having the faintest clue what's going to happen 2 minutes from now. So that is totally structure and absolute chaos. And he said to be able to do that, of course, you need to have tons of experience and technique. Otherwise, you can't sit there and improvise on piano. It would sound pretty crappy. So to be able to do that, he said, I need to clear my head, all the technique, everything I learned, my musical background, I need to forget all about it. So technique is super good, but at some point you need to forget all about it. That's where you start to be interesting, because otherwise you're just copying everybody else. So I always think about that. So clear your mind and forget everything, your whole foundation basically, and just go for it.
How can listeners contact you? So you have an Instagram account and a website, right?
I would say Instagram is probably the easiest. Or my website. It doesn't matter.
And you have lots of photos and videos on your Instagram, so people can get inspired.
Yeah. And people are welcome to contact me. Also, if they need some help to sort something out, if they want to try out in furniture building or vinyl or something like that.
Yeah, we're at the end of our episode. Thank you very much, Jakob, for traveling back in time with me. It has been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. It was lovely.
And see your beautiful home as well. Thank you to all our listeners. I hope you learn a bit more about the 80s, about furniture design, and about how to trust yourself more. And see you soon on the next Color Your Home Happy episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, don't hesitate to subscribe, rate, or review on the different listening platforms. To say hello and get all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at rainbow.shaker. And if you want to check out my services, you can go to my website, www.rainbowshaker.com. Thanks again, and I wish you all a very colorful day. See you next time!